when it comes from the people, it means that there's like a genuine interest and understanding of why Bitcoin can benefit their lives, which I saw in Guatemala, because that comes from the people. However, I also see that the state can create this amazing role of bringing the infrastructure that we need to make it accessible to, like El Salvador it's so much before other countries now, and they will benefit from this. So I think it's, I don't know, some kind of balance you have to find. Like I would say that overall El Salvador's, I don't know, do people call it experiment? Bitcoin experiment. I don't want to say experiment, but it's unique what they are doing, and it brings global attention to Bitcoin's potential. And it's a great case study, if I'm going to use these words, in like how a country can innovate with decentralized finance. And I think that a lot of people or a lot of countries and other nation states are looking at what El Salvador is doing. And I'm sure that El Salvador, they will be ahead of us in the future.
Hej, välkommen till Bitcorner. Jag är Juan. Och min dagens gäst är Ammy Edberg. Ammy, hur mår du?
Jag mår bra, hur mår du? That was actually good. Yeah, it was good. You sound exactly like, because my boyfriend is French. You sound exactly like him when he tries to speak Swedish. It's so funny.
Yeah, I know. Hello guys, welcome once again to Bitcorner podcast. Today my guest is Ammy. She's from Sweden and she's also known as BTCchick. So welcome.
Thank you.
All right, that was my poor little intro in Swedish, but I managed. So I'm proud that you told me that it was quite good.
But it was actually good.
All right, I need to practice more.
The first podcast where I'm a guest and you do the intro in Swedish.
Really?
Yes.
All right, I need to practice more. That's awesome. So, Ammy, as you probably know, I always ask my guests if they can introduce themselves on the podcast. It's the first time that someone is watching the podcast or probably watching some content related to you. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I will ask you about your Bitcoin rabbit hole journey.
Absolutely. So my name is Ammy, and I go behind the pseudonym, maybe you can say, BTCchick. So by the name BTCchick, I started to do TikTok videos in 2021, trying to make Bitcoin accessible and understandable for anyone. So first it was only in Swedish, and then for around a year ago, I decided to switch to English, and I also went on X. So my main platforms right now is TikTok and X, and I also released my first YouTube video from a travel.
I saw it. Congrats.
Yes, from a travel I did to El Salvador and Guatemala. So that's my 3 platforms now. I do also have my own website where you can read both about me, what I'm doing, and about Bitcoin. It's btcchick.com, so it's easy to remember. Besides that, I work with social media for BTC Prague. I help them with their social media. So every time you see something on X or Instagram or LinkedIn, I'm the brain behind it, together with my colleagues helping me. And I'm also the president of Bitcoin students at Stockholm University, and I'm a board member of the Swedish Bitcoin Association. So that's more or less me.
That's awesome. By the way, guys, a little bit of context. I didn't bring Ammy here because of El Salvador. It was just a wonderful coincidence that she was going to El Salvador when we were in contact. Actually, we postponed the podcast because of that, because I wanted her to be there so we can talk about it today. Yeah. So it was wonderful.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, one question. Why do you choose BTCchick? Where did the name come from?
I think it was like, I don't know, honestly. It just came to me to have like BTC because of Bitcoin. And then since it ends with a C and chick means girl. So for me, it was Bitcoin girl.
That's
I don't know. I saw it and I thought that maybe someone already had it. But and
no
actually,
one had it.
on X, someone does.
Really?
Yeah, I've been trying to reach this person because my handle on X, it's BT_chick. Because someone has BTCchick. I've been trying to reach this person because the account have not been active since 2016.
That was what I was going to ask you, if it was active or not. Wow. Well, probably in the future. But you don't have Nostr yet, right?
Yeah, I do actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to go more and more Nostr. And I think it's working good now. I downloaded Nostr for maybe 1.5 years ago. But it was not working that well back then. And I didn't use it. And then when I went to BTC Prague last year, it was a lot of people talking about Nostr. So I decided to try it again. And now it works almost the same as Twitter, which is incredible. So I should use it more. I am using it a bit, but I should do it more.
Yeah, one advice that I can give you, and it's also an advice for myself because I stopped using it just because of timing. But when I release something when I used to release something on Twitter, I release it on Nostr as well.
Yeah.
So because if you say I'm gonna do it later, you never do it.
I know. So, I should start to do that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And when do you find for the first time the value of Bitcoin? And when I say value on this podcast, I not refer to the monetary value. I mean the reason behind you felt related to Bitcoin is like, all right, this is something.
Wow. The thing is that when people ask me about my Bitcoin journey, I usually say that it starts in 2011. Coincidence? No, but because I went.
Are you Satoshi? No, just kidding.
No, but I went to Egypt in 2011 together with my mom, and it was the first time I really experienced poverty, and I think that really did something to me. It indeed planted some kind of seed, and like a bigger understanding that the world does not look like I think it does. It was the first time I saw that, okay, all the people in the world doesn't have a roof over their heads. Like, kind of a little bit like, why do the world look like this? Because these people are exactly like me, but it feels like kind of like they don't have the same rights as me. But we're the same person or the same people, but we're just like raised in two different parts of the world. And I think my trip to Egypt planted a seed in me, which then brought me to Bitcoin. Because for some kind of reason, I wanted to study international political economy. And I didn't know Bitcoin back then. So I started to learn about how the world works, more or less, both with how it works in the nation, but also internationally. And it was when I started to read about inflation, especially, and when I understood why the world looks like it does. I think one part of why I wanted to study international political economy was because I know that I need to get a bigger picture of this. And that came from me when I was like 10, 11 years old. I say that my Bitcoin journey starts in 2011 because I know that I was a Bitcoiner back then. But it was in 2021 when, I was put in the understanding of how our monetary system works, or maybe moreover doesn't work. And I started to look for solutions. And that's how I stumbled across Bitcoin, which was incredible. And since I already was put into the problems with today's financial system, it was quite easy for me to understand Bitcoin as a solution. And I usually say that it's so hard to orange pill someone. Like when I talk to my friends, they don't understand the power of Bitcoin, because how could they? Imagine putting a vacuum cleaner in someone's head, telling them, use this, and they never seen a vacuum cleaner before. They don't know how to use that. They don't know what do I solve with this? But if you show somebody a dirty floor and you say, we have to fix this, should we try this? They would figure it out right away. So I think that helped a lot for me with my Bitcoin journey, that I come from the problem.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting because, I think it happened to me the opposite. The first time that I came here, I saw that, of course, Latin America, back then El Salvador, when the first time that I came here, it was around 2010. El Salvador, it was a nightmare. So, but here Europe it was quite okay. Actually, way better than now, if I'm being honest. Yeah. So, and I saw the difference, right? And so yeah, I get you in the sense of that. Back then, and I still think that Europe is very spoiled, because somehow the economy is, because of the European Central Bank, it's somehow stable, right? Well,
That's
of course, we know.
Yeah. Like Europe is in a completely different context. And that's why, like, the trip to Central America, you need to get out of the European bubble. Because all of my friends think that the biggest financial problem they have, it is when Swish stops to work, and Swish is how we directly send money to each other. And that's only the top of an iceberg. So, absolutely. Yeah, I think travel is a good, like an important way to understand that the world does not look like you think it does, because I was also one of them.
Yeah. And what another thing that I want to ask you is about your bachelor. Now I think I can understand the way that you decided to do it, but I want to ask you, how do you what was your thought? How do you decided to do this thesis that it's called, I think, Bitcoin Potential Opportunity in Developing Countries?
We could just have a discussion about the name, because I first wrote Bitcoin's technical infrastructure in developing countries, or I think I maybe wrote what Bitcoin can bring in developing countries. And my professor in international political economy said, stop. You cannot say that it brings something. You need to say that it potentially can. It was hard to write about Bitcoin at Stockholm University. I tried it the first time when I did my first study, which is a smaller essay you write. And I was still learning about Bitcoin here. I didn't know that much, and I wanted to take every opportunity to learn about it and to study it. So I asked if I could write about Bitcoin. And he explained to me that this essay is kind of small, and Bitcoin is way too complex to write about. You don't have like the space to do it, but you can write about bricks instead. I think you should write about bricks. So I decided to write about bricks, because of course he's my professor, and he's a professor in international political economy. So why shouldn't I trust him? Now, years later, I understand that bricks is way more complex than Bitcoin. Problem was that he didn't understand Bitcoin, and he thought it was complex. So the first time I started to have a little argue with my teachers, it was then in 2020. Yeah, in 2020. And then it was during 2022 when I was going to write my bachelor thesis. And I once again asked my professor, which this time is another professor, if I can write about Bitcoin. And he says no. He told me that it's not enough studies on the subject, and you need to rely your study on something. So, like, a part of me believed him that it was not enough studies, but I was so convinced to write about it. I really felt this need to write about it. So I decided to go online, and I did a lot of research, and I saw that it is studies. So I handed him a paper. It was just one A4 paper that I wrote. And I wrote about how the world looks today. I pointed at that 0.8, which is crazy because when I wrote it was 1.8 billion people. Now now it's 1.4. So it's decreasing, which is incredible. Wow. But when I wrote about this, I highlighted that point, the unbanked people. And I also showed him that studies show that half of these people have a phone. Where can you store your Bitcoin? On your phone. I also highlighted the fact that the World Bank says that an economic system is a human right. So I went on all these points, handed it to him, and he said, okay, you can write about this. Exactly this paper, I did some small changements. It is the introduction to my thesis, which you can read on my website. But it was not easy to write about it, and I got a lot of doubt from my professors, but I'm so happy and thankful that I decided to do it.
Absolutely. I think there's something that I'm missing is that because what you told me is that you found the solution that is Bitcoin, but also you found the problem. But when was the moment that you found that Bitcoin actually was the solution to this that you were experimenting and that you saw in Egypt? And then, of course, it leads to do your thesis, right?
I think a lot throughout my research. It was when I kind of like realized how deeply financial exclusion impacts people in developing countries, and then also how Bitcoin is a game changer. I also think that if you have like the logically thinking about like how the world looks and how Bitcoin works, you can see it kind of fast. Because for me, it was the understanding that like many people in these regions, they lack access to bank accounts, and it's not because they don't want them, it's because they can't have them. And when you understand that Bitcoin then provides a financial alternative that is borderless and it's accessible to anyone just by internet access and a phone. So I think it went pretty quick there for me. And I also want to highlight the point that the conclusion in my bachelor thesis, it was that I needed to write. It was crazy because one of the persons I interviewed in my study was Alice Gladstein.
I saw that.
Yeah, and he told me so many times, he said, Ammy, it's not a question of could, it's already happening. He told me that so many times. And when I then go to my professors in political international economy, they tell me that I need to redo my conclusion, because my conclusion is saying that Bitcoin as a technological infrastructure is bringing great potential in developing countries. And they needed me to change how I wrote it, and I needed to write could bring, which for me is crazy because it's already happening, right? Yeah. People are already experiencing this, and it's not only in El Salvador, it's in many developing countries. And we see the circular economies that are growing every day. And it was not allowed for me to put that in my essay. I needed to write could. Which for me was just crazy.
Yeah. And also I saw, because I read part of it, because I don't even remember how I stumbled upon with your thesis. I think it was so long ago, but I think it was because I was doing an interview with Margot Pais. I don't know if you know her. That she's from the Bitcoin Policy Institute in the United States. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think it was like this, like, I think the NGO, no, what was it? No, the UN, probably. I don't remember. Well, there was one institution that made a paper about, this annual papers about how Bitcoin is bad for the environment. And so, yeah. So back then, Margot, she's kind of a friend of mine. So from time to time, we get in touch. And I saw she made this post about like she was going to make a study about it to make the points, to highlight why they were wrong about it. And I told her like, hey, can you come to the podcast and talk about it? I'm going to give you blank space and you can talk whatever you want about that. And she was like, yeah, but give me some time because right now I'm doing the research. And then I think like between that time I was looking for other research and I think that's how I stumbled upon with yours.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Like that's also something I think is like great now, because my professors told me that it was not enough studies. So maybe I made it easier for somebody else to study Bitcoin. When the next person that comes to them saying like, I want to study Bitcoin, maybe it's easier for them now because they know that people are actually researching this and they are writing about it. So it makes me happy you found it.
Yeah. So what I was going to tell, hold on, I had two thoughts in my mind. What the first one is that it was one of the conclusions from Margot, that it was that what they did is that they didn't have enough information about the Bitcoin mining, because the information that they had was like 10 years ago, but Bitcoin is young, and between those 10 years, the technology has been improved, and now most of the energy that is used in Bitcoin mining is green energy.
Yeah.
So
it's great that you highlight that, because it's so often you hear that like problems with the Bitcoins, like mathematical formula, and we need to understand that Bitcoin is a technical infrastructure, which means like any other infrastructure it develops. Like we are developing Bitcoin's mathematical formula, okay, that will be the same, but the network all the time, okay, like it will change and it will look better. And for example, with the mining part, yeah, maybe it didn't look that good back then, but now we know how to do it and how to do it right. Especially if you look at what like Nayib Bukele is doing now when he used a volcano to mine Bitcoin. Okay, all the nation states that have volcanoes start to do that.
And it's one of the most powerful energy that are there. Yeah. So yeah, and we can talk a lot about the benefits, like it stabilize energy grids and so.
Yeah.
So probably is that I brought your study that I looked about it because I saw somehow that you highlight there are of course challenges, right? Like volatility and education gaps. So in your opinion, I don't know, what is the most critical step to build and trust in Bitcoin among the populations in general?
Yeah, I would say that. So if we look at the Western world, I would point at the media. What are we doing? What are we putting in our television? What are the news showing us? I had a conversation with some friends just for some days ago about Bitcoin, because now suddenly everybody is interested in Bitcoin because Donald Trump is talking about Bitcoin and
crypto, sadly.
And they wanted to understand a bit, and I tried to slowly orange pill them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they told me it's so hard to believe you because you are like a normal girl who happened to discover Bitcoin, or it's these tech geeks. And when the financial guy from Sweden is standing in television telling them how Bitcoin is the worst investment you can ever do, why would they believe me? And this is the hard part. Because Sweden especially, I think it's most of the countries in Europe, they are negative towards Bitcoin. Of course they are. I had an interview with Swedish television, and Swedish television always have to be neutral. So if I'm pro Bitcoin, they have to have somebody that's against it. So I asked them, who is going to be against Bitcoin? And he answered, it's a Bitcoin expert from the bank. I looked at him like, you know that no Bitcoin expert would like to work at the bank.
In banks, yeah.
And he chose to be against it. And so, and that's also like the interesting part, because I wouldn't say that I ever had a conversation with somebody that truly understands Bitcoin and that choose to be against it.
Yeah.
But so I think that the big issue here is the knowledge gap. As I said before, when Swish stops to work, our instant payment system in Sweden, when it stops to work for a few hours, you're witnessing the top of an iceberg. And the real issue is that these people, they don't realize how fragile the entire system is. I mean, if you understand that your money can be frozen, it can be inflated away, it can be controlled by someone else, do you really want to own it? And it's the Ronnie that have the hardware store in El Sante. He made this really good explanation where he said that you don't give your keys to your car to someone else, and then you ask for the permission to drive it. And you don't give your keys of your house to someone else, and then you ask for the permission to enter your house. So why are you doing it with your money?
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and this is what most people don't understand. And it's the knowledge gap that is what we have to fill in Europe and in Sweden. And Sweden is in Europe, but like in Sweden is so negative towards Bitcoin. So it's crazy. Like what I see in media, they put a girl in Swedish television that is like the face out for Bitcoin now. And she is promoting her own coin, Bitcoin. Like you hear where we are. I'm ashamed. And I'm trying so hard to go on there and tell them that this is not the case. But they want the population to believe that it is. So they will not put me there. And the only reason it is like that is because, well, the government know that when people start to learn about Bitcoin, they lose their power. And the same with the banks. That's why we don't have Bitcoin experts at the bank.
Cuando dejas tus activos digitales en un exchange o en custodia de alguien más, te expones a riesgos de terceros no deseados. A diferencia del sistema bancario tradicional, Bitcoin te permite tomar el control total de tus fondos utilizando tus propias claves privadas. Esto te permite ser soberano y esencialmente tu propio banco. Al tomar el control de tus Bitcoins, puedes evitar riesgos innecesarios de terceros. Almacenar tus Bitcoins en custodia de terceros, como los exchanges, puede exponerte a ataques de actores malintencionados, gobiernos o estafadores que lo único que quieren es apoderarse de tu dinero. Las billeteras de hardware aumentan la seguridad de tu billetera porque tus claves privadas se almacenan en un dispositivo especializado que no está siempre conectado al Internet. Como te he dicho antes, mantener tus claves almacenadas en un dispositivo en línea puede exponerte a factores adicionales de ataque, por lo que se recomienda usar una billetera de hardware al almacenar grandes cantidades de Bitcoin durante largos periodos de tiempo. Jade es una billetera de hardware no custodial para Bitcoins y Liquid que ofrece opciones de firma simple y firmas múltiples. Yo personalmente lo utilizo para almacenar mis Bitcoins, ya que me siento mucho más seguro manteniendo mis Bitcoins en una billetera fría que en una almacenada, por ejemplo, en mi teléfono. Si estás pensando en adquirir uno para ti, no olvides utilizar el código de descuento de nuestro show, Bitcorner Podcast. De esta forma estarás apoyando directamente el show y además obtendrás un 10% de descuento para la compra de tu billetera fría. Bitcoiners is happening. The first Bitcoin conference is coming to Barcelona, and it's called Barcelona Cyphers Conference on June 6 and 7, and I'm honored to be an official media partner alongside Lunaticoin. I'll be broadcasting live with the Bitcoin Film Fest from one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Barcelona, that is my second home. So expect top-tier speakers, deep dive discussions, and a pure Bitcoin experience, not noise, just signal. Join us in Barcelona and get your tickets now, and if you want a discount, just send me a DM and we will have it. Bitcoiners, llegó el momento. Bitcoin Cyphers Conference llega a Barcelona el 6 y 7 de junio y tengo el honor de ser uno de los media partners oficiales junto a Lunaticoin. Estaré transmitiendo en vivo con Bitcoin Film Fest desde Barcelona, que es mi segundo hogar, y espera grandes ponencias, debates profundos y una experiencia 100% Bitcoin, sin ruido, solo señal. Así que acompáñanos en Barcelona y consigue tu entrada ahora. Y si quieres algún descuento, simplemente envíame un mensaje directo y lo obtendrás. Nos vemos. No, yeah, I was asking you because I know that Sweden is probably one of the few countries here in Europe that you basically don't use cash. You pay everything with your phones, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So that's why I brought you this question, because how do you start Orange Peel? And I don't know if it's good is the exact word, but to let them know that even if the system apparently works perfectly well, it doesn't. It had a lot of flaws. You don't see it, right? So how do you bring them to this new system that solves this?
Yeah, I think like around me, the people that are interested is the tech guys, which is of course funny. I want to talk Bitcoin to anyone, but I like moreover want to orange pill my like girlfriends, my friends that are so feminine and they don't care about this at all. I don't want to say that Bitcoin is masculine, but I think that Satoshi is a man. And I mean, look at the community. The girls we're more and more, but like we're still very underrepresented. So when I'm trying to orange pill my friends, I usually go for the emotional part, trying for them to understand that if we look at women in Afghanistan, do you know who Roya Mahbub is?
No, who's?
So she's an entrepreneur, and she started a business where she paid her female employees in Bitcoin. And I think she got some kind of prize for this later. So if I understand it correctly, what happened to one of her employees? It was a girl, and she was harmed by her husband, and she was experiencing a lot of violence. And she couldn't leave because she got paid in cash. So every time she got home from work, her husband took her money away from her. And this was a real problem in Afghanistan, which Roya Mahbub saw. So she decided to pay them in Bitcoin and cash, because if they would come with nothing, they would understand.
I think I have heard this story. Yeah, it sounds to me.
Yeah, she goes to some conferences, I know, and like what she done was just truly amazing. It was this female employee that like experienced a lot of violence in her home, and she couldn't leave. It was impossible for her to leave. But when she had her own money, when she was in charge of her own money, it was possible for her. So she fled from Afghanistan all the way to Germany, where she then started her own business, like a coffee shop or something like that. So Bitcoin more or less saved her life. And I think like this is kind of the way to go to get to the mainstream people, for them to understand why Bitcoin is so important. And you can also go with the aspect of how many people that is unbanked. The problem is that we don't really understand this until we experience it. Because I also saw it on television. I saw the kids in Africa, and I understand that no way that they will ever have a bank account. But you don't understand. I think you need to, the power of traveling is incredible, because when you really experience it, you understand that the world is awful and we can change this. And Bitcoin changes this, which is one of the reasons I think that all the Bitcoiners are so hopeful, because we don't see the world as this cruel place. But yeah, we do, but we see the solution and we know that the future will be bright. So I think if you also go with that, but it's a lot of things you can point at. I mean, just the problem with IDs. For example, we were in Guatemala now, and we talked to one local guy. He said that he lived in a democracy, but only 20% or something, 40, I don't know. I don't remember the exact number. It was very low. Can vote because you need an ID to vote. And the government is deciding who can have an ID. Is it a democracy then? So he told us that he don't have an ID, which means he don't have a bank account, which means that he cannot vote in his own country. But he also looked at us and said, look at me, I have my Apple Watch, and I have my phone, and I have Bitcoin, which means that I'm a free man. And just that was like, it was incredible to hear, because in Europe, we still see Bitcoin as an investment. And that was, when I was talking to my friend some days ago, I was trying to turn the conversation for them to see Bitcoin as a currency more than an investment. Because they always go in like, okay, how do I invest? How do I get rich? And no, Bitcoin is not something you get rich quick of. It's more about how do I not get poor slowly? Secure your money. And it's the same, like if you look at these developing countries, like if you look at Venezuela, the hyperinflation that happened there, for them, like, yeah, Bitcoin is volatile, but for them, Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. And they see that because they experience this. So they understand the power of a fixed supply. If we look in Sweden, people will still say that we need a 2% inflation to keep the economic system going. We need to stimulate the economy, otherwise everything will collapse. And you need to explain to them that no, you've been taught wrong your whole life. They just want you to believe that.
It's super funny that, I mean, like, how do you raise your beliefs? Because it's basically reset your belief systems. And of course, that's shocking nobody likes to tell them you're wrong, right? Because if you tell them you're wrong, they feel personal. It's not personal. It's just the way it is.
And I think that's also kind of the beauty of Bitcoin, because when you understand that you've been taught wrong your whole life, you start to question, what more did I get taught wrong? And you start to look at the news and you understand that I'm not getting the full picture of this. It's another point of the story. And I think that's good. I think that, like, people need to realize that, because you get brainwashed. Like, whether you like it or not, you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the end, it's because I think that because we were taught about that in a school, but like they teach us like this is happening, but no way is it happening, right? Like inflation. Yeah, there's inflation. Things are gonna cost more eventually, but why? You have taxes, but why? So we never ask like what money actually is until we get Bitcoin, right? It's like what you said, like Bitcoin is like the first question, and then comes more questions. That's
exactly, and that's the good part about Bitcoin, because you get, like, when you go in this rabbit hole, it's not ending, and suddenly you start to question what money is, which is the first question you should have asked yourself when you had $1 in your hand. You should have asked, like, what is this and what gives this value? Did you do that? Probably not. And it's not until you understand Bitcoin that you start to question, but what is money? Did I ever ask myself what money is? No, you didn't, because you are being taught to trust it.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that I just forgot. I forgot.
No worries.
But yeah. So I'm gonna ask you one more question about your thesis, and then we're gonna drop to something else.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that one of the person that you talked to was Alec Glastein.
Yes.
What do you think was some or the most surprising or eye-opening thoughts or perspective of opinion that he shared with you?
That he shared, I would say that, so I didn't know that much about how the Bitcoin adoption was kind of forced in El Salvador. I didn't see that myself. I just heard like, okay, Bitcoin will be a legal tender in El Salvador, and it's because of the President Nayib Bukele. And that was the reason why I was like, okay, we need to study this. What do people think about this? But I think Alex was more or less the only person that highlighted that the Bitcoin adoption was essentially forced by the government, which makes it a top-down initiative. And he didn't like that. He was very against that. And I think he was the only one that was very against that, because he means that Bitcoin adoption has to be more organic. So, like, and I actually experienced this myself during the trip, because when we were in Guatemala doing these interviews, we asked people about, like, anyone that accepted Bitcoin, we said, why are you accepting Bitcoin? And all of them had these amazing answers, like, it's a part of the future. I want to be a part of this revolution, and it's bringing, they gave us these amazing answers. And then we went to El Salvador and we asked them
I know where you're going.
Yeah, we asked them the same. And of course, we got great answers there as well. But most of the people actually said, what do you mean? Because I have to. So, and I think it's important to highlight that aspect that Alex talked a lot about, but also one thing about El Salvador, as I understand it, is that Bitcoin is a legal tender, which means that according to law, everyone has to accept Bitcoin. The thing is that the law enforcement is low. So it's so many people that are not accepting Bitcoin. And that's, I don't know if it's kind of okay for the government. I don't know how they react to it, but it's so many people that doesn't accept it, which, I don't know, makes it more or less okay, because the law enforcement is slow.
Yeah.
But so what you actually saw was that many people didn't understand Bitcoin. And also he highlighted the point of the Chivo app, that it was controlled by the government, which of course will lead to more skepticism and resistance. So the problem with forced adoption is that people are not ready and they are not educated enough. And it's kind of like what do we want? Because I can see the good part in both of it. Because I think many people would prefer a bottom-up approach, where Bitcoin comes from the people themselves. And because when it comes from the people, it means that there's like a genuine interest and understanding of why Bitcoin can benefit their lives, which I saw in Guatemala, because it comes from the people. However, I also see that the state can create this amazing role of bringing the infrastructure that we need to make it accessible to, like, El Salvador it's so much before other countries now, and they will benefit from this. So I think it's, I don't know, some kind of balance you have to find. Like, I would say that overall, El Salvador's, I don't know, do people call it experiment? Bitcoin experiment. I don't want to say experiment, but it's unique what they are doing, and it brings global attention to Bitcoin's potential. And it's a great case study, if I'm going to use these words, in like how a country can innovate with decentralized finance. And I think that a lot of people, or a lot of countries and other nation states are looking at what El Salvador is doing. And I'm sure that El Salvador, they will be ahead of us in the future.
Yeah, I wanna share with you some thoughts about that. Of course, you can ask me now that you have
I would love to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, because that's one thing that when I was a student and living it and doing the podcast, and watching everything that happened. Of course, being the first mover, you will have a lot of mistakes because you're the first mover, so there's no track record, right? So, but yeah, everything that you said is true. I think that's actually one of the mistakes that the government did, is like I get the word enforce it, but I didn't see it like that, because we had something like different with the dollar as well. So back then we used to have colones, that it was our currency, right?
Yeah.
And then we switched to the dollar. So I think back then it was, for me, I felt like that was enforced, because they told us like today, like, no, you're gonna be able to spend colones or dollars. It's up to you. But what happened is that, of course, we had
you needed to use the dollar.
Yeah, because everything was compared to the dollar, and because the dollar comes from the United States. Of course, the United States, it's the biggest country in the world, and it's one of the, back then that's one of the problems, but that's another topic, right? That United States can influence a lot on the global south.
The dollar hegemony.
Yeah, exactly. So they told us like, yeah, you can use both, but it came with a lot of consequences, like the prices were higher, right? The salaries, people were preferring to get paid in dollars, but because of the change, $1, if you compare dollar with colones, it was like 8.75. So imagine your savings. I remember my grandparents to have all these savings in colones, and then it came the dollar. So now their savings were divided by almost 9, because they were converted in dollars. So that one, it was enforced, I think, because in the end, now we use just dollars.
And that's really interesting that you highlight that.
Mm-hmm.
Because does people highlight this? Because when it comes to Bitcoin, we say that it's forced adoption. But when it comes to the dollar,
yeah,
I don't know.
So,
it's crazy.
No, and another thing that I want to highlight is that with Bitcoin, we do have both options. So what I see is that, for example, if you have a small business, for example, or you're a merchant, whatever, so you had the option to use the Chivo, because of course we didn't have any development infrastructure or at all. People didn't know about any wallet, right? So they said like, all right. And I get that, like, we're going to give a solution, our government wallet, but of course it's a government wallet. Just the existence, just itself to be a government wallet, it's bad, right? But it was the solution. So the thing is that, yeah, you have to accept Bitcoin, but in Chivo you have the options to change it to dollars. Just like, for example, your juice is a good example. So you don't even earn in euros, I think. You in coronas, right?
Yes. We have our own currency.
Yeah, so when you come here, I guess you have to, of course, you have in your bank account or whatever, you have Swedish coronas, but you pay when you come to Europe, you pay in Europe. But the amount that is extracted from your bank account is Swedish coronas, but we receive here euros. So it's the same with Bitcoin and dollars, right? So you can pay with Bitcoin, but the merchant has to accept Bitcoin, but doesn't mean that you have to keep the Bitcoin. You can.
I didn't know you could do that in the Chivo app, because I know it was one place we went to where when I wanted to pay with Bitcoin and the merchants say you have a lower price if you pay in dollars. They really wanted dollars. I think also the knowledge in El Salvador about the app.
No, yeah, the UI UX is terrible, because even for me, that I get used to it, to pay in Bitcoin, and with Blink or Wallet Satoshi, whatever, it's quite easy. But when you see that, it's like it's not working well, because you had to choose what you're gonna pay, then which channel are you gonna pay, and how you're gonna receive it.
And all of the merchants that had the Shiba wallet, they put on-chain transactions. So I actually did 2 on-chain transactions before I understood that. Like, I understood it directly. I was like, but we're doing an on-chain transaction. And then I was like, however, okay, I'm a Bitcoin maxi, let's do it. And then I saw we were in a store just buying some food, and I saw that on the screen that you could just press Lightning in the Chivo app and you can have a Lightning payment, but the cashier didn't know that. So it was just a coincidence that I saw that the Chivo have Lightning, which is great. But I would still stick to something else rather than a wallet that is controlled by the government.
No, of course. That's the other thing, that Chivo's a mess. And according to what I know is that according to our latest loan with the IMF, one of the deals that we're going to get rid of it. And I think that's a favor that the IMF did to us. So yeah, any other wallet works well. But yeah, so you see, that's why I get it. It's like, I get that people see like enforced, but we don't have any structure. But of course, it's bad just because it's a government wallet. So, and the other mistake that I want to highlight is that, so the thing is that I think Bukele wanted to accelerate that because they saw that we had our own Bitcoin circular economy in El Salvador, right? So that was from their own. So what they did, it was their proof of work.
Yeah.
So
that was organic from the people, bottom up.
Exactly. That's what you said. Like, it happened in Guatemala. So accelerate that. It was like, I know the excitement that probably he heard. I was like, okay, let's make it legal tender. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of discussion on how you can do it, right?
Yeah, and I think like that's kind of what will happen with a lot of nations sooner or later. But I mean, if we look at the US now, they are at a turning point, like both politically, economically, and financially, where we see like a battle between the old system of debt, inflation, and control versus the new paradigm of sound money and financial sovereignty. And I think since Bitcoin is being more like relevant than ever, the nation states are seeing that, which means like, okay, either we play the game or we get played by the game. So are we in or not? They are starting to understand that we need to collaborate with these people, because otherwise we will not be here soon. So I think that's one of the things that's happening, and like, I mean, it's inevitable. How do you say that? Inevitable.
Yeah, it's so. Yeah, it happened the same to me. Yeah, it's like, not our language. English is not our main language, guys. So
I mean, creating a Bitcoin strategic reserve, which hopefully will happen. The smartest individuals and companies already hold Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation and systematic risk. So why wouldn't a nation state do the same? So like, and I think the countries that will adapt to Bitcoin early, whether it is doing like El Salvador and having it as a currency, or having it like maybe US will have it as a strategic reserve, they will have a huge advantage in the long run. So what's happening now is that nation states needs to decide like, okay, do we want to be in the lead or do we want to be left behind? And the US now, I mean, they want to be in the lead. They always want to be in the lead. So they need to act.
But that's another scenario. We'll see how it goes, because sadly, I don't remember who I was talking with about this, but it was like, with Dennis Porter. I told him like, you see, I see a lot of Bitcoiners in favor of Trump, which I don't care. But the thing is that I think he doesn't get it. For example, Senator Loomis, I know she get it because she's Bitcoin only, defends it a lot, and she made a lot of statement about Bitcoin. So you see that she knows, she has done the studies, right? But when it comes to Trump, it's like he wants. yeah, he was just to be popular because he says Bitcoin and crypto, but you see
Yeah.
that he doesn't know the difference of both.
Yeah. And I
So-
think that's the crucial part, is that like, to do this, everything needs to be handled in the right way. I trust Cynthia Limas. I hope she goes up there and tell him what to do and not to do. But I mean, he signed this executive order. I think it was something about like strengthen America's leadership in digital financial technology or something like that.
Yeah.
And it did address some important aspects. It was like protecting the US from CBDCs, which is a positive step. It's a big step and it's a positive step. However, it was also like this broader push of deregulation of the crypto space. And I did not really make up my mind if this is good or bad, because the concerning part is that this is also opening the doors for scams, market instability, and like, I think the part that's even more concerning is that if Bitcoin is going to be taken seriously at a national level, it needs to be separated from like the broader Bitcoin casino. And like, it feels like right now he's setting us up for the risk of another cycle of fraud or distrust.
Exactly.
So that's the scary part. It's a thin line, and I hope that we can get some good people around him and around more presidents.
Yeah. I just want to say, guys, thank God that we have Max Geyser
Yeah,
and Stacey
yeah.
Harvard. Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know if you have seen that lately in Twitter, there's a lot of recent hate with XRP, because apparently they have been paying a lot of banks to the banks to make a narrative to tell a story about Bitcoin that is bad for everything, basically everything, and why they are better about it, right? So I don't know if you know, but in El Salvador, when before we had it like a legal tender, XRP was one of the companies. I think it was the company that went to El Salvador and told us like, yeah, like we can help you with your Bitcoin law. So, and they tried to push to be there in El Salvador, but I think the people that they got in contact were Max and Stacy. I don't know if Max and Stacy, if you're hearing this, let me know if that's true. But that's what I hear, the whisper in the streets, right? But so if they manage to talk to Max and Stacy, probably they tell us like, get out of here.
Okay, can we send Max and Stacy to the US then?
I think they are in El Salvador.
Yeah, but that's crazy. So now it's kind of the same thing happening in the US then.
So, but that's the thing, that hopefully they have some people that they give the right advices. Otherwise, it will be like, as you mentioned, another cycle of madness. So yeah, Amy, we're gonna wrap it up. I don't want to take much more.
The time goes so fast.
Yeah, I know. I still want to ask you some stuff about El Salvador, but and Guatemala, because we have barely talked about that. But as I mentioned, we have a little game in the podcast, and I think we're gonna do that right now. So guys, if you have been in the podcast, you know how it works. If it is the first time that you're in the podcast, let me explain how it works. So my previous guest always have a question for my next guest. So today I'm going to share to Amy the question from my previous guest. And of course, you will have the opportunity to make the question for my next guest. So let me share it with you. And I don't know if you know her, but this is Tanya. Yeah, so she's from Azteco, and they do this kind of vouchers. Well, there are vouchers, so you can pay in Bitcoin, and you have like this, like it works something similar like Bitrefill here in Europe.
Okay.
So you can pay something with Bitcoin, and you have it on these prepaid gift cards, and you can spend it in whatever they are working with. So this is the question from her.
What do you hope people will say about your work in Bitcoin 50 years from now?
I hope that it's hard. I want to say so many things, but I hope that people.
You can take your time.
I hope that we are in a different reality in 50 years from now, and that people look back at not only me, but at you and at all the Bitcoiners, thinking like, thank you for standing up and saying stop to the system that didn't work, and for choosing humanity. And yeah, I don't know. I just hope that people are thankful and that can see the hard work that we put into what we're doing. All of us, whether you are doing a podcast or writing an essay or doing videos on TikTok or writing books. This guy, Dusan Matuska, he said during the Prague conference last year that we're all microeducators, and I think we need to let that sink in. Every time you talk to someone about Bitcoin, you're actually educating someone. And I just wish that people look back at our work. I don't want to say my work because we are in this together. And I hope they just are thankful that we did what we had to do, more or less.
That's a deep answer.
It's a deep answer.
Deep question.
Say about my work in 50 years. But it's a good question.
Yeah. Actually, sometimes I have another question that I normally do, but I'm not going to do it today for you.
What?
Yeah, because it's another deep question, but I'm gonna save it for next time that you come to the podcast. Because I gotta be honest, we barely touch everything that I wanted to ask you. So I know that I love this kind of podcast because that means that there's a lot of topics to talk about. So actually, I'm glad whenever I know that a podcast is a success when I have like a lot of prepared questions, and I barely ask like 2 or 3 out of 50. So yeah, so I know we need to do a second part about it.
We need to make another episode.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to. So we're going to start wrapping up. So my questions it has to be about El Salvador and Guatemala. So if you can share with us your highlights, what are the things that, I don't know, because you have been in the grassroots communities, initiative, Bitcoin communities there. So anything that you want to point out or highlight, what do you take from those trips?
Something that I take with me, like that I really brought me, like since I stepped out of the country, is the happiness in the people. And I think that does not only come from Bitcoin in El Salvador, especially. It's from the important things that Nayib Bukele did, especially when it comes to like the gang violence, because people are so hopeful, and it's amazing to see and witness that. I think I met the most happy people that exist on planet Earth, and I met them in El Salvador. And it's not because they are in a better reality than another country, but it's because they know how bad it can get and how it can change, and how we will go, how they are going to something better. They already experience it. And yeah, it's the happiness within the people, and it was amazing to witness that, and to bring like that home back to Sweden, to this dark country where everybody's stressed and angry.
Yeah, and I'm gonna share something with you, and is that, and also with the audience, the reason that people see that we're so happy is because of course of the dark times that we had. But if you the next time that you go to El Salvador, or I don't know if you asked that question, but I guarantee you that if you ask any Salvadorians, if they know someone that it was, think about the worst, like kidnapped or killed or whatever, they know somebody. Or they were directly involved somehow with a familiar, a friend or whatever, or they knew someone who's human. So like we all are, including myself, we are all attached to that past, right? So that's, as you mentioned, we know how bad can it be and now how better it is. So, and we need to learn from history, right? To not repeat it. So that's why sometimes I tell that in the podcast that the Bitcoin success and all the other success, it cannot happen without also the other part, right? That you mentioned, that we get rid of the violence there. So, and the corruptions, because we had, and now we're battling the political corruption, but there's layers.
Like another big question to talk about that is so interesting. And we talked about the gang violence with so many local people we met, and it was incredible to hear their stories. And also about how the world see Nayib Bukele, because some parts of the world see him as a dictator that does not do well for the country. But when you go to El Salvador, I think I didn't meet anyone that doesn't like what he's doing. And that's also incredible to witness.
I don't know people that think Bukele. I don't know Salvadorans, but I get them. I mean, I get, because it depends on your social circle, sadly, right? Yeah. So if you somehow got spoiled or lucky, let's say lucky, because it's not spoiled, but if you were lucky to grow with a safe environment, there were no safe environment, but if you managed to be in the, I don't know, the safest bubble there, you never experienced. Probably, as I told you probably heard about someone that it was killed or kidnapped or whatever, but it was probably not directly involved with you, probably indirectly, or probably you saw in the news. So they don't see that, all right, so we don't have violence anymore, but they were never being affected, right? So that's when they say, like, all right, maybe he's a dictator because they never had those problems, right? So, but the people that were directly in touch with that they experienced, that is like, I mean, it's a completely new life, right? So it's, as Stacy likes to say, it's a rebirth. So yeah. All right, I mean, my last two questions. One is, what can we expect from you in the nearest future, like new materials or so? And the second one, let's say, I don't know, where can people find you?
I have so many things like coming up, and I don't want to talk too loud about it yet, but we are going to make something in Stockholm. Like, I'm going for Mission Impossible, because my country have the world's oldest central bank, and it's going to be hard, but it's not stopping me. So we're going to do something in Stockholm. And then I have some things happening also under my name, BTCchick. So you will see, if you stick around me, you will see. And of course, like in the near future, we have the BTC Prague conference. And since I work with them, I'm so excited to be around there, to meet all the people in the Bitcoin community, and to see what happens backstage, behind the doors. And it will be truly incredible, I think. And if you want to follow my journey and everything I do, the easiest way is just to follow me on X, because it's where I daily post things. But if you're not on X, then I have my website, which I mentioned before. It's BTCchick.com. And I have a section there called What's Up, where I usually write, like, this is happening right now. And you can also go and see, you can press BTCchick on X, BTCchick on TikTok, and on YouTube, and you don't even have to have an account to see my posts. If you don't want to go on social media, but still want to see it, then you can see it from my website.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. We need also to talk in another podcast about the Swedish Bitcoin Association and the Bitcoin student in Stockholm.
Yeah.
You see, guys, there's a lot of topics to talk about.
Yeah.
So good luck with that. And I'm going to drop everything on the podcast notes. so they can go there. And yeah, anything that you want to, final words that you want to say that probably I didn't ask. I didn't ask a lot of things, but anything that you want to add.
Stick with Bitcoin. Don't listen to when the president of nation states are starting to talk about crypto. Stick with Bitcoin. I think if you're listening to this, you're already a Bitcoin maximalist. And in that case, I just want to say continue to stack your sats as well as you use the system, because we need to use the system, otherwise it will not work.
That's awesome. And if you're a newcomer, if you're a new Bitcoiner, keep learning.
Keep learning and put away the money you can every month. I think it's easier to buy a little bit of Bitcoin every month than to invest a big part of your portfolio at once. But buy a little bit of Bitcoin every month and thank yourself later.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. See you next time. See you next week. I think that's it. Ciao.
Thanks for listening.